Welcome to ZoomInData. Hello everyone. Thank you for joining the 19th video in our extended Azure Logic Apps series. In this session, titled Building Resilient and Idempotent Workflows, Advanced Patterns, we will cover core principles of resilience and idempotency in distributed systems and why they matter in Logic Apps. Advanced patterns for retries, circuit breakers, dead letter queues, sagas, and compensating transactions. Techniques to make workflows safe to retry, duplicate-proof, and fault-tolerant. Real-world examples and best practices for production-grade reliability, 2026 edition. Building resilient workflows is what separates hobby projects from enterprise-grade automation, especially when dealing with unreliable external services, network failures, or high-volume processing. If you find this content valuable, please subscribe to ZoomInData and enable notifications to stay updated. Let us begin. Why are resilience and idempotency critical in Azure Logic Apps workflows? Distributed systems, APIs, databases, SaaS services, are inherently unreliable. Transient failures, timeouts, throttling, and duplicates are common. Without resilience, a single failure can cause data loss, partial updates, or cascading errors. Idempotency ensures that retrying or duplicating a request does not cause unintended side effects. Example: duplicate orders, double payments. What does idempotency mean in the context of Logic Apps? An idempotent operation produces the same result regardless of how many times it is called, with the same input. Examples: updating a record with the same data multiple times should not create duplicates. Non-idempotent: sending an email or charging a credit card. These must never be duplicated. How do you make a workflow idempotent? Use unique identifiers, correlation ID, request ID, message ID, passed from the trigger or generated early. Check for prior processing. Example: query Dataverse, Cosmos DB for existing record, before executing side effects. Store processing state. Example: processed, failed, with the ID and skip if already completed successfully. What is the most common idempotency pattern using Dataverse or Cosmos DB? Trigger receives message with unique message ID or order ID. First action: check if record with that ID exists in Dataverse table or Cosmos DB. Status equals processed. If exists, terminate workflow with already processed status. If not, process the message right pointing arrow update record status to processed on success. How do you implement retry policies for resilience? Configure retry policy on individual actions, built-in, fixed interval, exponential backoff, or custom count interval. Apply only to transient errors, 429, 503, timeouts, not permanent failures, 400, 401. Combine with run after configuration to define fallback paths on max retries. What is a circuit breaker pattern and how to implement it in Logic Apps? Circuit breaker prevents repeated calls to a failing service by opening after X failures and half opening after cooldown. Implementation: use Azure Cosmos DB or Redis to track failure count per endpoint. Condition action checks status: if open, skip or fallback; if half open, try once and reset on success. How do you handle dead letter queues and poison messages? Use Azure Service Bus Queues, topics with dead letter sub-queue, Auto dead letter after X delivery attempts. Logic Apps workflow. Trigger on service bus message. Try processing. On failure. Move to dead letter queue. Separate workflow monitors dead letter queue. Alerts team or retries after manual fix. Explain the Saga pattern for distributed transactions in Logic Apps. Saga coordinates multiple steps across services without 2PC, two-phase commit. Each step has compensating action. Example: book hotel. Cancel hotel on failure. Use stateful standard workflow or Cosmos DB to track Saga state and trigger compensations on failure. How do you implement compensating transactions in Logic Apps? On failure in scope, right pointing arrow, run parallel branch with compensating actions, reverse previous steps. Use run after equals failed on compensating branch. Store transaction IDs and status in Dataverse, Cosmos DB to track which steps need reversal. What are best practices for handling transient versus permanent failures? Transient, network blips, 429, 503, automatic retry with exponential backoff. Permanent, 400 bad request, 401 unauthorized, terminate immediately with meaningful status. Log failure type and route to different paths, retry queue versus dead letter. How do you make HTTP actions resilient to API failures? Add retry policy on HTTP action for transient HTTP status codes. Use until loop to poll for eventual consistency if API is asynchronous. Implement circuit breaker logic using external state, Cosmos DB counter. What role does Azure Service Bus play in resilient workflows? Provides durable messaging with retry, dead letter, and session support. Logic Apps can trigger on service bus messages. Process, complete or abandon message. Dead letter sub-queue acts as automatic poison message handler. How do you use Azure Durable Functions or Logic Apps for orchestration resilience? For very long-running sagas, consider durable functions, entity functions for state. Logic Apps standard stateful workflows are usually sufficient and simpler. Combine. Logic Apps calls durable function for complex orchestration. What monitoring and alerting should be in place for resilient workflows? Alert on failed runs, high retry counts, dead letter queue depth, and circuit breaker open events. Use Azure Monitor plus log analytics to track patterns, e.g., frequent 429s from specific connector. Send critical alerts to Teams, Slack with Run Correlation ID for quick investigation. How do you test resilience and idempotency? Chaos engineering, manually fail actions, throttle APIs, duplicate messages. Use sample payloads with duplicate IDs to verify idempotency. Run load tests with Azure load testing to simulate failures and retries. What are common anti-patterns to avoid? No idempotency check. Duplicate side effects on retry. Infinite retry loops without backoff. Resource exhaustion. No compensating logic in sagas. Partial updates and data inconsistency. How do AI-integrated workflows benefit from these patterns? OpenAI calls can be rate-limited right-pointing arrow, use circuit breaker and retry. Idempotency prevents duplicate AI-generated content, e.g., emails. Saga pattern ensures cleanup if AI step fails mid-process. How have resilience features improved in Logic Apps as of January 2026? Better native retry diagnostics and automatic back-off tuning. Enhanced dead letter support in managed connectors. New actions for state management and compensation orchestration. Why is resilience knowledge critical for interviews? Interviewers ask, how do you make a workflow safe to retry? Or, design a saga for order processing. Shows production thinking. Most failures in enterprise integrations are transient or duplicate related. Differentiates candidates who understand theory versus those who can build reliable systems. What is your step-by-step checklist for building a resilient workflow? Add unique correlation, message ID early in workflow. Check for prior processing before side effects, idempotency. Configure retries only on transient errors. Use scopes plus run after for error paths and compensation. Add circuit breaker or dead letter handling for failing services. Monitor failures and set alerts. How do you handle exactly once versus at least once semantics? Exactly once. Use idempotency plus deduplication checks, harder. At least once. Except duplicates are possible. Rely on idempotency to make them harmless. Most Logic Apps scenarios use at least once with strong idempotency. What are real-world examples of resilient patterns in production? E-commerce order processing. Idempotency on payment. Prevent double charges. B2BED. Dead letter queue for malformed messages. Manual review. Payment gateway integration. Circuit breaker on gateway failures. Fallback to manual processing. How do you document resilience design decisions? Add inline comments in workflow for retry policies and idempotency checks. Maintain external architecture decision records, ADRs, explaining saga versus choreography choice. Include failure mode analysis, FMA, in design docs. What tools help validate resilience before production? VS Code Local Runner, standard, with simulated failures. Azure Chaos Studio for injecting network faults and throttling. Load testing with duplicate messages and intermittent errors. What final advice would you give for building truly resilient workflows? Assume all external calls will fail eventually. Design for it. Make every side effect idempotent. Test with duplicates. Monitor proactively. Don't wait for users to report issues. Start simple. Measure. Iterate. Resilience is a continuous improvement process. Thank you for watching this detailed session on building resilient and idempotent workflows in Azure Logic Apps. If you found this video helpful, please like, share, and subscribe to ZoomInData. More advanced Azure Logic Apps content is coming soon. Stay connected and keep learning. See you in the next video.